I was folding the navy blazer Thomas wore to dinner when it clicked against the hardwood like a coin. I'm 63. My knees don't like kneeling, but I eased down, pressed my palm under the lining, and fished out a white plastic card printed with a blue pelican and the words, Bayview Harbor Hotel, Room 417. The stamp on the back said Mar 11, 2:06 a.m. I laid it on the dining table beside the last of the crème brûlée he'd insisted we order. You deserve a sweet ending, he'd said, tapping his spoon, calling me scatterbrained because I'd forgotten the server's name. He'd laughed, our friends had laughed, and the sugar crust had cracked like thin ice. I keep receipts. Dates and amounts calm me. So I pulled my 2019 MacBook from the cupboard where I hide his belittling, opened my email, and typed Bayview Harbor into the search bar. Nothing. I tried reservation and confirmation. Still nothing. Thomas kept the finances, the passwords, the schedule. Married since 1985, and I was still treated like a guest in my own life. On a hunch, I checked his phone on the charger. Face ID doesn't care about a wife's intuition, but Thomas is a creature of habit. 2580, the last 4 digits of his first brokerage line, still opened it. His messages were tidy, except for a thread muted to gray. MC Lewis. Under it. Meet after closing? 1:30. Valet knows you. Then later, 2:03 a.m. Made it up. Room's warm. At my age, I don't shout. I document. I photographed the hotel key on my granite counter with my electric bill as backdrop. The date, 03/12/23, the address, Wilmington Island Road, the plague of adulthood, proof. Then I scrolled his calendar. Client cruise, Miami, March 15th and the 25. 10 days. A window. A clock ticking I could hear behind my ribs. Evelyn, you're paranoid, the old voice in me began, the voice trained by years of, I'll handle it, and you wouldn't understand escrow. But there was another voice, low and steady, the one I grew up with on East Gwinnett Street. Thomas doesn't own your common sense. He came in whistling. You left a mess in the kitchen, he said, loosening his tie. That roast was over-salted. Don't take it personal, you're just not a details person. I set the jacket on a chair and poured decaf into my favorite mug, the one with the hairline crack he hates. You're right, I said, voice flat as the table. I must have missed a detail. His eyes glittered. See? Growth. He kissed the top of my head, the way a man pats a dog. I'll be gone 10 days. Try not to overthink. And don't touch the Tesla. Insurance is under my name. I won't, I lied, thinking of the key fob I'd seen once in his valet tray, the silent black pebble that woke a car like a confession. Before I slept, I placed the Bayview Harbor card in a Ziploc with the date, time, and a note in my tidy teacher's script. Found in Thomas's blazer, 9:08 p.m. Then, with my hand steady, I opened a new folder on my desktop. Carter, Receipts. If stories like this help you breathe, tap like and subscribe. The bank. Subscribe to our channel. This helps our work reach more people. Notification arrived at 2:11 a.m. with a name I didn't recognize and a memo that made my skin prickle. Transfer to M. Lewis, $1,200, room and gas. But why was his name on that receipt? 2 nights later, the house smelled like lemon oil and goodbye. Thomas likes to leave a clean stage when he exits it. He says mess speaks poorly of a man's discipline. He checked his suitcase 3 times and checked me with his eyes a 4th. I handed him the printed itinerary like a secretary. He glanced at it and smirked. You printed this? Thought you hated PDFs. Some of us learn, I said. I'd already learned plenty. With $200 to M. Lewis on Mar 13th, 2:11 a.m., and another transfer for $350 labeled Detail and Delivery. Money doesn't lie. It accumulates. He slipped his wedding ring into his pocket, a ritual he thought I'd never notice because I'm scatterbrained. Clients on this cruise are conservative, he explained too lightly. I don't want to deal with optics. What optics? I asked, my voice steady like freshly ironed cloth. Don't be dramatic, Evelyn. He shut the conversation with a gesture, 2 fingers pinching air, closing a Ziploc. I'll be back March 25. Don't spend on anything big. HOA meeting on the 26th. I need them in a good mood for the new guidelines. Rejection is not always a scream. Sometimes it's a man tucking away his ring and your reality with the same flick of the wrist. He kissed my cheek like amiability was a tax deduction and headed for the garage. I followed, slow. The 2022 Tesla Model S rested under the fluorescence like a smooth white lie. $85,000 before taxes. He'd said it was a business expense, a rolling office. On the workbench, a shallow silver bowl held screws, cufflinks, orphaned keys. I tilted it, and there it was, the spare fob, cold and sullen. I slid it into my robe pocket and counted my breaths. Small loss first. Thomas stopped at the door, turned, and held out his hand. "Wallet," he said. "I'll need the joint card. Expenses get audited." Translation: no personal spending while he's gone. He took the card from my fingers and placed it in his money clip. "Don't be offended. You're terrible with numbers." "Of course," I said, feeling the heat rise to my temples. He left at 8:02 p.m. His taillights cut a red slash down our driveway and vanished into the Savannah dark. When the silence settled, I opened my desk and set the Bayview Harbor keycard beside the Tesla fob. Objects talk when men stop. "Room 417, I whispered, tapping the Pelican. "Every trail needs an address." I called the hotel. "Ma'am, we can't share guest names," the receptionist chirped. "But if you're looking for a misplaced item—" "Actually," I said, "I'm returning something." She paused, then lowered her voice. "If it's the silver cufflink from Mr. Carter, we can place it in our lost and found till Monday." The line buzzed. I wrote, "Mr. Carter cufflink, Bayview, pick up Monday," in my notebook under the date 03/14/23. A detail. A thread. The clock appeared. 10 days to learn everything before March 25th, before the HOA meeting, before he could rewrite the narrative. I opened our filing cabinet, the one labeled Taxes 2023. It was locked. I tried the old trick, 2580. The drawer slid open like a sigh. On top lay a thin manila envelope stamped Car, Invoice, and clipped to it a photocopy of a purchase agreement with the letterhead Savannah Electric Motors. The line buyer read Thomas Carter. The line co-buyer was blank. But the print date at the bottom wasn't blank. It read Feb 23, 2023, 4:55 p.m. The same afternoon, he'd told me he was at church helping the men stack chairs. The timestamp on the invoice matched the church service I sat through alone. Morning in Savannah is a pale blue veil, and that day it fell over my kitchen like a truce I hadn't signed. I brewed coffee the way I've done since 1985. 4 scoops, water to the 8-cup line, wait until the drip slows. That year, on June 8, 1985, I married Thomas in a church that smelled of lilies and pine sol. After the cake was boxed and my bouquet began to lean, he held both my hands and said, "Evelyn, we're partners, 50-50, no secrets." We opened a joint checking account at Savannah First Federal the next week, account ending 2580, and I memorized the number like scripture. Years sandpaper U. In 1996, he refinanced the house without asking, then brought me the papers with a smile. "Just sign where I highlighted." In 2004, when Mama passed on January 17th, $2,400 from her life insurance went into that same account. "For house repairs," he said. In 2011, my teacher's pension started, and he had me set up direct deposit because you hate paperwork. Every step, another inch of ground surrendered for the sake of peace. He called me scatterbrained. I called it keeping the marriage. Now it was March 15th, 2023, and 10 days stretched ahead like a test. I pressed the Bayview Harbor key card against my coffee mug, watching the blue Pelican blur. On the notepad I wrote, "Clock, 10 days. Money, $1,200 plus $350. Object, Tesla fob." East light crept across the counter, picked out the hairline crack in my favorite mug, and made it gleam like a thin, honest scar. I opened the drawer where we kept warranties and found the 2011 file for the refrigerator we no longer owned, the 2015 receipt for the roof we'd argued over, and a folder labeled Vows. Thomas thinks sentimentality is a hobby for women and funerals, but he'd kept the program from our wedding day. I traced my maiden name, Evelyn Harris, printed in black. Inside, in my 23-year-old slanted hand, I'd scribbled a note: "No secrets, no debts alone." I laughed, soft and broken. Secrets don't stay buried. They recycle into other forms: key cards, transfers at 2:11 a.m., a spare fob that isn't supposed to exist. The cruise itinerary lay on the table. Miami, March 15, 25. He'd left at 8:02 p.m. the night before. By now, he'd be boarding or already smiling for some group photo with clients, a plastic lanyard around his neck, his wedding ring tucked in his pocket like an IOU. At my age, I don't shout, I document. I opened Carter, receipts on my desktop, and created subfolders: bank, auto, hotel, HOA. I slid in screenshots: the $1,200 transfer to M. Lewis, the memo, room and gas, the $350 for detail and delivery. I printed them, 3-hole punched, and put them in a binder left over from my classroom days: blue plastic, 1.5-inch spine, the one that survived the flood of Hurricane Matthew. At 7:22 a.m., my phone buzzed. A calendar reminder I didn't set. Service appointment, 3:20, 10 a.m., Savannah Electric Motors. It was tied to our Gmail, Thomas and Evelyn, 1985, the one he said he maintained. The note field read, "Confirm delivery address with ML." Delivery address? ML. I took a breath, deep and neat. 10 days is a short time to rebuild a backbone, but a woman my age can do it with a binder and a pen. I picked up the Tesla fob, cool as a lie, and slipped it into my pocket. If secrets recycle, then so do vows. Mine would come back as a ledger, each line a stone in my hand. I set the wedding program beside the Bayview card, 2 relics of promises kept and promises broken, and whispered to the quiet kitchen, 50-50 starts today. With me. The printer spat out the service reminder with a confirmation number at the bottom, or ML 417. Why did the service note carry the same numbers as his hotel room? The garage was cool and smelling faintly of rubber and men's cologne, the one Thomas buys at Belk every Father's Day and pretends is a gift from someone else. The 2022 Tesla Model S idled in its own silence, a cathedral of screens. I tapped the fob, and handles slid out like the car had been waiting for me all along. "Good morning," the car chimed in its cheerful, useful voice. I eased into the driver's seat, my hips complaining, and stared at the 17-inch screen as it woke. I don't set colors on anything. I've learned truth looks best unadorned. But the map exploded into blues and grays anyway. I pressed navigation, then recents. A list marched down the glass: Bayview Harbor Hotel, 2 Bay Street, Savannah Electric Motors, 1512 Montgomery, Ardsley Park, East 51st, and a cryptic M. Lewis, saved, with a star beside it. I tapped M. Lewis, saved. The address filled: 1320 East 51st Street, Savannah, GA 31404. I felt a small, cold click behind my ribs. M for money, M for midnight, M for the memo line that didn't mind telling on him. I tapped Bluetooth. The paired devices list slid open like a confession booth. Thomas's iPhone sat on top. Below it, Megan L., iPhone 13. I said her name out loud to the empty garage. Megan, my niece, 35. Polite, helpful, all elbows and gratitude at Thanksgiving, offering to load the dishwasher while Thomas told stories she already knew. My stomach went slick. I scrolled through the car's dashcam viewer. Thomas thinks tech is a toy until it proves him wrong. The folder Sentry Clips offered dates and times. My finger hovered over FEB 23, 4:58 p.m. The tiny screen in a screen showed a sliver of dealership glass, a salesman's grin, and Thomas leaning into the passenger window to say something I couldn't hear. A woman's reflection skimmed the glass. Dark hair, sunglasses. Then a hand with pale, pink nails touched the hood, like blessing a child. The nails were familiar. I'd complimented them at Christmas, Deck 24, when Megan passed me the yams. My breath slowed. At my age, I don't dramatize. I measure. I wrote, Cars Recents, Bayview, SEM, Ardsley Park, paired, Megan L., Sentry, FEB 23, 4:58 p.m. I opened the glove compartment, press of a button, and found registration, insurance, and a folded Savannah Electric Motors invoice. The line delivery to had a ballpoint correction, E51st scrawled over W51st, initialed ML. It's the small letters that convict. The phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mrs. Carter, this is Janelle from Savannah Electric Motors. Following up for your appointment on March 20th at 10 a.m., could you confirm the drop-off location? Mr. Carter mentioned Ms. Lewis would meet our driver. I swallowed once. We'll keep it here, I said, voice level. No need for Ms. Lewis. Perfect, Janelle chirped. Also, Mr. Carter asked about enabling driver profile sharing, so Megan could keep her settings. Should we proceed? I looked at the fob in my palm, small and certain. No, I said, and hung up. I pressed profiles on the screen. There it was, Thomas, guest, and buried like a seed, Megan. Seat position softer, mirrors angled wider. The car remembered her shape. Outside, a mockingbird trilled from the azaleas. I shut the car off and listened to my pulse, calm as a metronome. 10 days, a binder, a name that now had a street, a Bluetooth trace, an invoice initialed ML. Evidence isn't loud. It accumulates like dust until someone runs a finger across it. I stood, locked the car, and slid the fob deep into my pocket like a plan. The house felt different when I walked back through it. Walls at attention, floors primed for footsteps that would arrive expecting the old Evelyn. I set the Savannah Electric Motors invoice on the blue binder's first page and wrote the heading, A Teacher Would, Unit 1, Names Tell the Truth. When the doorbell rang at 9:47 a.m., a familiar voice floated through the intercom, sweet and bright as wrapped candy. Aunt Evie? It's Megan. I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd check on you while Uncle Thomas is away. If she was in the neighborhood, why did the Tesla app say her last trip ended in our driveway at 9:41 a.m.? When numbers enter a room, they bring their own light. By dusk, the kitchen wore that light like armor. I opened the blue binder to Unit 2, Follow the Money, and set my calculator beside the Bayview card. The clock on the stove read 5:40 p.m. 9 days left before Thomas returned, and the HOA meeting, March 26th at 6 p.m. He once told me, "You hate spreadsheets." I taught high school history for 32 years. Balancing grades is spreadsheets. I logged into Savannah First Federal, joint account ending 2580. The account promised to me on June 8, 1985, like a vow. First screen, recent activity. Mar 13, 2:11 a.m. Zelle won $200 to M. Lewis, room and gas. Mar 14, 9:06 a.m. Debit $350, detail and delivery. Feb 23, 5:12 p.m. H $8,500. Savannah Electric Motors, down payment. Down payment. He told me the Tesla was a no-cash lease, tax efficient. Numbers don't lie. They annotate. I printed each page, 3-hole punched, signed the margin EC 03 1523 1758. The ritual steadied my hands. In documents, I found a folder Thomas thought I wouldn't understand. Taxes 2023, draft. He'd saved a PDF from QuickBooks labeled Ardsley Renovations LLC, 1099 contractors. My breath slowed. Ardsley, the neighborhood he likes to name drop. The spreadsheet listed one contractor, Megan Lewis, $18,550, YTD, address 1320 East 51st Street, the same as the starred M. Lewis saved in the Tesla nav. Category, Client Retention, Consulting. I whispered it to the empty air, tasting the metallic calm of a fact. He paid her as a contractor. Consult what? My marriage? Scrolling, I saw a cruise line charge. Phoebe 27, 4,980. Memo, Client Retention Retreat. Double cabin. Double. He had told me the trip was comped by a vendor. He lies the way some men chew mint. Habit, not hunger. At 6:12 p.m., I called Savannah Electric Motors and asked for Janelle. I'm looking for a copy of the final purchase agreement, I said, voice as even as ledger paper. Of course, Mrs. Carter, she said. Our records show buyer, Thomas Carter. Co-buyer. Oh, looks like he left that blank. She hesitated. There's also a pending form, business use certification, listing primary operator ML for mileage logs. Please email whatever is public to e.harris.carterer, I said, and stamp it received. A ping hit my inbox, an invoice, SEM 44729, and a business use cert, draft. The certification line read, mileage tracking to be shared with secondary profile, Megan L. My binder took another breath, pages growing heavy with his shortcuts. I checked Georgia Corporation's division. The bookmark was still there from back when my seniors did civics projects. Ardsley Renovations LLC existed, formed Jan 9, 2023, registered agent, Thomas Carter, business address, P.O. Box 3312. No mention of employees, just contractors. I printed the filing and stapled it behind QuickBooks. Stakes aren't feelings, they're numbers with consequences. If Thomas was funneling personal expenses, car, cruise, hotel, through a shell, the IRS can turn romance into a fine. The HOA could too, if they learned he installed a charger without a permit. It sat on our garage wall humming like a kept secret. The HOA email in my folder warned, unpermitted installs incur $1,000 fine per occurrence. Vote March 26. I underlined $1,000 and wrote public leverage. At 6:44 p.m., a last page slid off the printer. Bank statement, February PDF. Midway down, FEB 23, 4:55 p.m. Cash, withdrawal, $2,000. Branch, Victory Drive. Right below it, 5:12 p.m. ACH, $500. SEM, 4:55, the exact minute the Tesla's Sentry showed him at the dealership, 4:55, the minute our church bulletin said the men were stacking chairs. I placed the statement under a desk lamp. The bank stamp at the bottom glittered faintly. Verified, T. Carter. My pen hovered, then recorded the line I would not let him edit. Down payment and cash same day as church duty. The printer hiccuped, coughed up one more surprise. Schedule, HOA Agenda Draft, submitted by Thomas Carter. Item 3 read, retroactive approval for EV charger installations completed before 3/1. Grace period fee, $0. Why would he need retroactive approval unless he'd already broken the rule? And for whom besides himself? I don't lock my front door in daylight. Savannah teaches you to greet before you guard. But that morning, when Megan sang my name through the intercom, I pressed the deadbolt with my thumb and watched the hallway camera blink awake. 9 days. No improvisation. I opened the door with a smile I'd used on tired ninth graders for decades. Megan stood there in a breezy sundress, hair twisted up, carrying a pan wrapped in foil. Lemon bars, she said. Uncle Thomas said you love them when you're stressed. Your uncle knows so much, I replied, stepping aside. She moved through my foyer like she'd practiced, eyes sweeping the console table, the valet tray, the bowl where a spare fob used to nap. I had already slid that fob into the blue binder, tucked beneath Unit 1 like a pressed leaf. We sat in the kitchen. She set the pan down and angled her chair just enough to see into the hallway that leads to the garage. How are you, Aunt Evie? It must be boring without him. Cruises are more for, like, couples. Her phone buzzed face up. A preview flashed before she swept it away. Thomas. Remember, keep notifications off. I poured sweet tea. I prefer quiet to company that lies, I said. I pushed a napkin toward her and watched her nails, pale pink, the same shade from the Sentry clip. She hesitated a fraction too long. Uncle Thomas is complicated, she tried. At my age, I said. Complicated is just a synonym for calculated. I set the blue binder on the table deliberately, flipped it open to Savannah Electric Motors. Invoice, SCM 44729. Her pupils tightened. You baked. I print. She laughed too loudly. You're so dramatic, Aunt Evie. Don't get lost in paperwork. It's not healthy. Also, the HOA can be nasty. People talk. Maybe don't. Bring family stuff there? Interesting advice, I said, from a contractor of Ardsley Renovations LLC. I slid the 1099 printout halfway across, let it breathe between us. $18,750 for consulting. Pink crept up her neck. That's private. Uncle Thomas helps everyone. He's generous. With other people's money? I asked. She switched tactics, a pivot smooth as a sales rep. Listen, I came because I worry. You don't drive much. The Tesla is a lot. If you want, I can take it to my place. Keep the battery in good shape. Uncle Thomas would like that. There it was. The reach. She tilted her head toward the hallway, casual as sunlight. The binder took my fingertips' weight like a friend. Oh, I said, light as air. We're fine. She bit a lemon bar, wiped a fake crumb that wasn't there. Could I use the restroom? In the hallway mirror, I watched her pass the guest bath and ghost toward the garage door. The bolt clicked. She pressed it, found it locked. Her phone vibrated again. A second preview, too quick for her thumb. Thomas. If she has the fob, get it. Check bowl. I stepped into the hallway, voice soft. It's the other door, darling. She flinched and smiled. Silly me. We returned to the table. She reached for the binder. Can I see? No, I said. Just that. Calm as a blade if you sharpen it slowly. She swallowed, stood, and wrapped me in a hug that smelled like citrus and cologne I knew too well. We're family, she whispered. Let's not make this ugly. Don't humiliate Uncle Thomas. He'll fix the church donation and settle your little worries. My little worries have invoice numbers, I said. Her smile froze, then thawed into something practiced. Then at least wait until after Sunday, she murmured. Father Reynolds doesn't like drama during Palm Sunday. She grabbed her bag too quickly. A metallic chirp sounded faintly from inside it, the kind of chirp Apple devices make when they connect to something nearby. After she left, I cleaned the counter with slow circles. My iPhone buzzed a new message. AirTag found moving with you. I traced the sound to the pan of lemon bars. I lifted the foil, sifted the crumbs, and found it taped under the rim, white and smug as a lie. I set the AirTag beside the Tesla fob, 2 small moons caught in the kitchen light, and opened Unit 3, People Who Help. If she's tracking the car, who is she planning to meet there? And when did Thomas teach her to spy on me? By morning, the house had the brittle quiet of a school hallway after report cards. I set the blue binder on the table, clicked my pen, and wrote the day's lesson plan. 1, bank. 2, car. 3, camera. The clock on the stove read 9:30 a.m., 9 days until the HOA meeting on March 26th at 6:01 p.m. And then 10 until Thomas would swing back in with that salesman's smile, and a version of events polished to a shine. First stop, the bank. Savannah. First Federal smells like carpet glue and conditional love. I asked for a full February-March printout on the joint account ending, 2580. The teller, a woman young enough to be one of my former seniors, clicked, frowned, and excused herself. A manager appeared with teeth too white for bad news. Mrs. Carter, your online access has been changed by the primary user, he said. We can release physical statements if both parties sign or if there's a court order. Both parties are on a cruise, I said, calm as chalk dust. I slid across my driver's license and a copy of my pension deposit record. He hesitated, then printed summary pages only. No images of checks, no Zelle notes. Apparent defeat is still a note in the margin. I initialed each page EC 03-16-23-10-12 and tucked them into Unit 2. The line I needed, Ardsley Renovations, 1099 to Megan Lewis, 18,750. Wasn't there. That stayed locked inside the drafts Thomas kept. Back home, I walked to the garage with that teacher's patience that fools people into thinking you're soft. The Tesla blinked awake, screen greeting me like I was a guest in my own driveway. When I pressed brake, a red box curtained the map. Pin to drive required. Another line. Set by Thomas, 03-16-07-48 a.m. Of course he'd wake before dawn to move goalposts. I tried 2580, number 1985, number 0623, my birthday, the one he forgets until Facebook reminds him. No. The car stayed a white statue. I stood very still. Defeats, like mosquitoes, look small until you count the bites. I pressed profiles. Thomas, guest, Megan. The car remembered her even as it pretended I didn't exist. I tapped service. A breadcrumb, the old appointment, 0320 10 a.m., Savannah Electric Motors. In notes, confirm delivery address with ML. The system wouldn't let me delete the note, but it would let me add one. I typed, owner to present ID, do not release to third party. Have you been through something similar? Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every comment. It's important for us to know we're not alone. EC and saved, a small speed bump on their smooth road. Defeat number 2 arrived wrapped in courtesy. Janelle from the dealership called. Mrs. Carter, Mr. Carter just authorized remote profile sharing for Megan and asked if our driver can pick up from 1320 E 51st instead. That won't be necessary, I said. Update your file. Vehicle will not leave Wilmington Island Road without owner present verification. She paused long enough for me to hear her think. Understood, she said, but the click of her keyboard sounded like rain on a tin roof. Fast, nervous. At 1:05 p.m., I carried the pan of lemon bars to the trash and peeled the AirTag from its tape. I didn't crush it. I registered its serial in the binder and slid it into a metal tin with my grandmother's sewing needles. Make the spy think their trick still works. If Megan wanted to watch me, I wanted her watching the wrong thing. Then step 3, camera. I called Bayview Harbor Hotel first, asked for lost and found. A man with a shrug in his voice told me yes. A Thomas Carter cufflink waited at the desk. No, of course they couldn't share footage without a request from law enforcement. Fine. I have taught 32 years. I know how to find a principal when a hall monitor says no. I opened a contact labeled D. Ruiz, class of 99. Dana used to doodle steamboats in my margins and now worked security at Port Miami. I left a message. Dana, it's Mrs. Carter, Evelyn Harris from Beach High. I need help. March 15th, Terminal D or E, morning hours. 2 passengers, Thomas Carter and Megan Lewis. If there's anything public, webcam stills, time-stamped snapshots, I'd be grateful. At 4:22 p.m., so my phone blinked an unknown Miami number. I took a breath and pressed green. A woman's voice, older now but still bright. Mrs. Harris, I owe you for pushing me through finals. Tell me what you need and what you already have so I don't waste your asks. I looked at the blue binder, heavy with his edits I refused to accept, and told her about the $1,200, the invoice, SEM 44729, the Bluetooth name, Megan L., iPhone 13, the pin to drive brick wall, and the cruise dates. Paper plus person, my favorite equation. Give me until tonight, she said. No promises, but I might have public cams that archive thumbnails. The garage hummed, the car a silent witness. I turned out the light, and in the dark, the screen glowed with its new red box like a stop sign I hadn't agreed to. If Dana sends me a still, will the face beside Thomas be the one from my Christmas table? Evening arranges itself differently when you're waiting on a friend to keep a promise from the 9th grade. I set the kitchen timer for 30 minutes and reset it each time it chirped. At 9:18 p.m., the phone lit with a text and then a call. Dana didn't waste time. Emails sent, she said. Nothing proprietary, all publicly available. A traffic cam near the Port Miami Garage G. A cruise terminal webcam still from a third party that archives snapshots once an hour, and a parking payment screenshot from a public kiosk. No personal info. The timestamps weave a story. Want me to walk you through it? I like stories with dates, I said. She did. March 15th, 7:42 a.m. Traffic cam shows a white Tesla with a barely visible dent on the rear license frame. Ours, turning into Port Boulevard. 8:03 a.m. The cruise webcam grabbed an hourly still. A man in a navy polo with a rolled garment bag and a woman in a straw hat at the base of Terminal E escalators. The quality wasn't a movie poster, but Dana had punched contrast and circled what mattered. The man's profile, Thomas's chin and arrogance, and the woman's nails, pale as a Florida shell necklace. 9:11 a.m. At the parking kiosk receipt, public readout, showed Tesla entered Garage G Level 2, ticket January 44127, lost ticket fee, waived monthly. The kiosk camera timestamp matched my binder's cruise itinerary to the minute. Could be any woman, I said, testing the scaffolding like a careful carpenter. Sure, Dana said. Except your Tesla's Bluetooth paired with Megan L. iPhone 13, and you told me she was at your door at 9:47 a.m. that same morning. To be at your house by 9:47, she'd need a flight from Miami at 7 a.m. or a drive made by a ghost. I stared at the still. The straw hat tipped. The woman lifted her hand to shield her face from the morning glare. There they were, pale pink nails I'd complimented on December 24th over sweet yams. You can change your story, but your hands tell on you. Email me the images, I said. She already had. The subject line read, Public Cams, 03 to 15 to 23, 07, 42, 09, 11, Port Miami. 3 attachments, each named with the exact timestamp. At my age, I don't decorate evidence, I label it. I printed them and slid them into Unit 3, People Who Help, behind the AirTag serial and the Bluetooth list. Then I opened voice memos and recorded quietly, the way truth arrives. On 03:15, Thomas drove our 2022 Tesla to Port Miami, entered Garage G, and boarded a cruise at Terminal E. He was not alone. She wore a straw hat. Her nails are the same pale pink from Century FEB 23, 4:58 p.m. At Savannah Electric Motors. I called Bayview Harbor again and asked for the graveyard shift front desk. A new voice answered, sleep-sanded. This is Kendrick. Kendrick, I said. I'm trying to return a cufflink for Mr. Carter. Could you confirm the pickup date he arranged? He rustled papers. Says Monday, March 20th, initials ML next to it. Thank you, I said. And underlined ML, pickup 320 in the binder. ML had long arms, hotel, car, port. I walked to the garage again, sat in the driver's seat, and stared at the car's red pin box. If I couldn't drive it, I could still own the narrative. I selected dashcam and copied the Century FEB 23 clip to a USB I labeled with masking tape. SEM 4:58 p.m. nails. I slid the drive into the binder's pocket. The screen dimmed, a quiet refusal. I touched the pin field one more time and typed what no man in my life believes I remember, the date of our first joint deposit, 061285. The box blinked and shrugged. 4 digits only. I exhaled, kept my voice level as I said to the empty car, we don't need you to move to make you useful. Back in the kitchen, I arranged the 3 printed Port Miami images, the invoice jucked SEM 44729, the $1,200 transfer at 2:11 a.m., and the AirTag in a neat fan. People call it pettiness when a woman arranges her facts. I call it curriculum. At 9:54 p.m., my phone chimed again. From an unknown number. If you bring this to the HOA, you will regret it. M. How did Megan get my private number, and what else has she accessed that Thomas swore I'd never understand? Sunday light slipped through the shutters like polite company. I brewed coffee and opened the blue binder, Unit 4, signatures don't forget, then walked to Thomas's office, a museum of trophies and closed drawers. The wall clock ticked above a framed certificate from Savannah Board of Realtors, renewed 0201 to 23. He likes paper that blesses him. The bottom file cabinet resisted, then yielded. Folders lined up like soldiers, AR, vendors, HOA, proposals, taxes, archive. My pulse steadied. I pulled out an unlabeled blue accordion folder with a cracked plastic tab. The first pocket held DocuSign printouts, the second, dealership pamphlets. In the third, a packet on heavier paper. Vehicle Purchase Agreement, SEM, Dagyo 44729, stamped received 02-2323, 5:06 p.m. I laid it flat under the desk lamp. Buyer, Thomas Carter. Co-buyer, odometer, 28 miles. Purchase price, $85,000. Down payment, $8,500 ACH. Cash due, $2,000, Victory Drive Branch, 4:55 p.m. The numbers hummed like a choir I could finally conduct. Then the signature line. Thomas R. Carter in a digital script too smooth for the way his wrist twitches when he signs credit slips. Under it, Evelyn H. Carter, spousal acknowledgement, my name, rendered in the same suspiciously perfect font, Timestamped 02-23-23, 1659, 12 EST. I traced the H. My real H bows to the left. This one stood up straight, like it had never taught a day in its life. I lifted the next page. Business use certification. Box checked, 50% business miles. Primary operator, ML. Secondary, profile share enabled. Signature lines again. Thomas, digital squiggle. Evelyn H. Carter, that borrowed H. Arrow 2, 23-23, 1702-44. My stomach cooled, the way a classroom settles when a principal walks in and the lesson turns serious. At my age, I don't shout. I compare. I fetched our 2011 refinance folder, the year he handled it, and set my real signature beside the forged one. Different slant, different lift on the tail of the Y. I photographed both under the same lamp with my electric bill 03-1823 in frame and wrote the caption on a sticky, Control sample versus SEM packet, forge. In the accordion's last pocket, a smaller surprise, a USB drive labeled AR 1099s in Thomas's blocky print. I slid it into my laptop. A directory bloomed, Ardsley Renovations, Contracts, including a PDF titled Consulting Agreement, M. Lewis, 01-12-23. The scope, Client Retention, Image Management. Rate, 75 HR, capped $20,000 Q1. At the bottom, the signatures. Thomas R. Carter, digital, and Megan Lewis, e-signed, 01-12-23-09-18 EST. My name sat in a boilerplate clause. Spousal consent acknowledged. Signed with that same obedient font, Evelyn H. Carter. I pressed print. The first page slid out. The printer hesitated, then resumed, like even the machine needed a second to accept what it saw. I stamped each page in ink. EC03-1823, 11:41 a.m. Found in blue accordion folder. Evidence isn't loud. It accumulates, and then, all at once, it weighs. A notification blinked bottom right. DocuSign. Recent activity. Thomas hadn't logged out of the shared browser. I clicked. Audit trail for SEM Lauger 44729. Showed sender. JanelleIsom.co. Signer 1, Thomas. Carteri, Signer 2. Evelyn.Harris.Carteri. Except the signer IP didn't match my home. It matched 132.241.19.7, a block registered to a co-working space on Abercorn Street. I highlighted the IP and pasted it into my notes. DocuSign signer IP, co-working, not home, not me. I scrolled further. A forward entry. Envelope viewed by Megan.Lewis at 02-23-23, 1657 EST. She had watched my fake hand sign my real name. I stacked the purchase agreement, business use cert, consulting contract, and DocuSign audit trail on the table and slid them into the binder behind a new tab. Unit 5, Theft by Font. Then I opened voice memos and said, level and slow, on 02-23, between 4:55 to 5:12 p.m., Thomas paid $10,500, labeled the car business, assigned ML as operator, and forged my consent from a co-working IP. My name has been traveling without me. The doorbell rang once, short, impatient. I checked the camera. A courier in a navy polo holding a small envelope stamped HOA Agenda Addendum with Thomas's neat arrogance on the label. If he's adding to the agenda from the ocean, what trap is he setting for March 26th, and how many signatures is he planning to borrow next? 9 days is a short rope if you're dangling. It's a long rope if you know how to braid it. I lined the kitchen table with what I owned. N1, timestamps. N2, bank and invoices. N3, Port Miami stills. N4, forged signatures in the blue folder. The stove clock changed to 6:05 p.m. I wrote on a note card. Goal. Remove his favorite trophy. Method. Lawful. Witnessed. Public. I called Marla Benton, a legal aid attorney I met at a school fundraiser, sharp as a pushpin. Marla, I said, hypothetically, if my separate property includes a vehicle titled only to my spouse, but community funds and fraud touch it, can I dispose of it to preserve value? Hypothetically, she said, you can't sell what you don't own, unless you hold a power of attorney or can prove fraud sufficient to trigger marital waste remedies. Why? Because hypothetically, I replied, I have a forged spousal consent on a car used to facilitate an affair and potential tax fraud, and a husband who locked me out of the car while enabling his mistress. Silence, the good kind. Bring me copies, Marla said. Tonight. Also, if you sell anything, make it symbolic, witnessed, notarized, and recorded with a bill of sale that recites why. The optics matter. I drove my 2007 Camry to her office with the binder belted in the passenger seat like a child. At 7:12 p.m., under a lamp that hummed like a sermon, Marla leafed through Unit 5, Theft by Font, and whistled. This is more than adultery, she said. This is paperwork cosplay. We can file an injunction to freeze assets Monday. In the meantime, what are you thinking? I want him to come home to a hole where his $85,000 pride used to be, I said, level. Sold for $1, cash, notarized, witnessed at the Wilmington UPS store at noon, with a camera on the counter and a copy sent to the HOA board. Marla's eyebrow climbed. Savage? Legal? Barely? Strategic? If your buyer is good faith, understands it may be litigated, and you're prepared to tender every proof at the HOA, it becomes a story, not just a transaction. She pulled a form from a drawer. Draft your bill of sale with this language. Conveyed for $1 in consideration of marital waste mitigation and preservation of community value pending injunction. Have 2 witnesses and a notary. Buyer? I asked. She smiled. You need someone who won't blink. She tapped a card from her Rolodex. Pastor Lorraine Fields, New Hope Baptist. Lorraine, who baptized my niece at 8 and scared city councilmen at 50. Lorraine picked up on the first ring. For $1, she said. Baby, I'll bring exact change. We set it. Monday, March 20th, 12 p.m., UPS store on Johnny Mercer BLVD. Notary fee, 10. 2 witnesses, Lorraine and Marla's paralegal, Theo. I emailed the store to expect us and printed the confirmation. Back home, I laid out the tactics. 1. Schedule a mobile tow for March 20th, 1 p.m. to remove the Tesla post-sale. I booked Coastal Towing, 95. 2. Place a notice on the HOA forum with polite language. Agenda item. Discussion of retroactive charger approval and vendor conflicts. Supporting documents will be available. 3. Prepare a USB set labeled HOA, evidence, Port Miami JPGs, SEM invoice, DocuSign audit, Sentry clip. Finally, I stood in the garage. The Tesla blinked its red pin like a dare. I held the spare fob and whispered, You don't have to start to stop him. I placed the fob in a small Velcro pouch and stitched it, clumsy but firm, into the lining of my old church handbag, the one with EH embossed in gold from Christmas 1992. Objects become armor if you sew them close. At 9:03 p.m., a text, unknown. Change of plan, it read. Car goes to 1320 E I 51st at 10 a.m. tomorrow for service. Driver will have paperwork. Don't interfere. M. I replied with a single photo. The UPS appointment confirmation stamped 12 p.m., 03/20. Then I turned my phone face down and wrote the final line on my note card. When he says I can't, I've already scheduled it. At 9:17 p.m., the door sensor chimed. Garage entry, open, though I hadn't moved. And somewhere deep in the car, a faint relay clicked as if a command arrived from far out at sea. If Thomas can reach into this garage from a cruise ship, what will he try at noon when I slide a $1 bill across a counter with 2 witnesses watching? The UPS counter smelled of paper and lukewarm coffee. The fluorescent lights made everyone look like a confession. I folded the $1 bill in the exact way my mother taught me, thin, deliberate, and slipped it into the corner of the bill of sale. Pastor Lorraine hummed under her breath. Marla's paralegal Theo clicked his pen like a metronome, and the notary stamped with a solemn official thunk. The receipt read, Bill of Sale, Tesla Model S, VIN XTF 2022, conveyed for $1, EC as seller, Pastor Lorraine Fields as purchaser, symbolic. Witnesses, Theo James, Marla Benton, notary, J. Alvarez, 03/20/23, 12 p.m. I signed in block, then in my teacher's slant, beneath the legal phrase, preservation of community value pending legal review. I felt the ledger line of my life shift as the clerk printed the copy and handed me the notarized page. They asked for ID. Pastor Lorraine smiled and produced hers with a theatrical flourish. A woman across the lobby glanced up, fanned herself, and went back to mailing a polka dot package. The world is an audience with short attention spans. I preferred the persuaded few. We were halfway through putting the notarized envelope in the binder when my phone vibrated, an incoming FaceTime from unknown crews. I let it ring once and sent it to voicemail. Thomas's face appeared later, recorded and small on my screen. A sunburned forehead and a background of undulating water he could never use to smooth a ledger. He left a message. Evelyn, don't be ridiculous. You can't. I muted it and let the message be another paperweight. When we got to the driveway, Coastal Towing backed the flatbed into place at 1:03 p.m. The driver lifted the Tesla onto the truck while Pastor Lorraine said, quiet but public enough for the neighbor mowing the azaleas to hear, sometimes you give something away to get your dignity back. The car's dash glowed an accusing red pin as they chained it down. The spare fob, stitched into my church handbag, felt warm against my hip. I expected the predictable. A call from Thomas, a lawyer's letter, a tirade. What I hadn't expected was Megan, quiet at first, standing by my garden gate when the tow truck pulled away. She wore the same pale pink nails, a face varnished to composure, and a bag that smelled of lemon bars and other people's generosity. She walked up the drive as if she owned the path. Aunt Evie, she began, voice practiced, hands folded like a prayer. Please. You can't just... Her sentence thinned as Pastor Lorraine and Theo stepped between us like pillars. I felt the mic of the world tilt toward me. Why not? I asked. I held the binder like a Bible. Because it's illegal? She swallowed. Because Uncle will be angry? She looked at the flatbed, then at the binder, then at my face, trying arithmetic on my patience. You don't understand the consequences. I understand receipts, I said. I understand signatures. I understand 2 bank transfers, alle $200 at 2:11 a.m., $350 for detail and delivery, $8,500 down payment on Feb 23 with a cash withdrawal at 4:55. I understand DocuSign IPs and Sentry clips. I understand you used my name to sign contracts. I touched the printout of the forged spousal consent and let it flutter like a small flag. Her eyes, always rehearsed, finally wavered. You don't have to ruin him, she breathed, as if I were the danger to spare him from. I don't want to ruin anyone, I said. I want the truth to be able to breathe in public. I set the USB on the hood of the Camry and clicked it open on my phone. The Port Miami stills, the dealership Sentry clip, the DocuSign audit trail with the co-working IP, the bank printouts, each file a small accusation with a timestamp. Why did you sign my name? I asked, simple as a math problem. Her jaw twitched. You don't understand how he... she began. I pointed to the recording app I'd started the moment she rang the gate. A small red dot in the corner of my screen blinking like a heart. Tell me, Megan, tell me where the $18,750 came from and why your invoice says client retention. Tell me why you picked up the cufflink at Bayview on March 20th at 8:05 a.m. and why your email viewed DocuSign at 16:57 on Feb 23. Say it while Pastor Lorraine listens. Her shoulders folded like paper. She stepped back, then forward, then private and sharp. He said it would be temporary. He said you'd never notice if I handled it. Just fix the appearances, Evie. I didn't know about the signatures, I swear. I only... You're a contractor who can't sign your own timesheets? I said, gentle as a ruler. You entered a VIN into a kiosk. You claimed the Tesla as business mileage. You received ACHs from the joint account. You met him at Port Miami on March 15th at 8:03 a.m., and then you came to my house at 9:47. I let each fact land. She stammered, colored, tried to redirect. Theo, whom Marla had trained to be quiet and precise, read the recording time and held up his phone. 000312. Megan admits meeting at port, receiving funds, and opening DocuSign views. Her face sunk to a thinner kind of pale. Pastor Lorraine pressed her hand to her mouth. She tried one last thing, blame, tremulous as an old coin. He promised me security. He said you'd understand. I don't need promised security that comes at my expense, I said. You could have said no. I slid the binding closed, the blue binder snapping like a verdict. Then I walked to the gate and watched my old white car roll down the street, my small sail folded snug in my purse, and the tow truck folding the Tesla like a removed tooth. Megan stood frozen as the truck turned the corner, her mouth open for excuses that wouldn't fit the evidence. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, my name on it, and when I saw the return address, my throat closed like a fist. The clubhouse smelled like lemon oil and ambition. The HOA tables were arranged schoolroom style, nameplates in a row, President, Greg Milton, Treasurer, Harold Price, and halfway down, Thomas Carter, Member. The calendar on the wall read March 26, 2023, in black marker. I arrived with the binder under my arm and a stack of printouts in a legal folder labeled HOA, Evidence. Marla had emailed a copy to the board that morning and notified the moderator, Item 3B, Review of Unpermitted EV Charger and Vendor Conflicts. Evidence presentation by E. Carter. Neighbors trickled in, Mrs. Lopez with her poodle, the Turner twins whispering about new gates, the cashier from the post office who always knows when bread is on sale. Thomas did not yet appear. He was due back at midnight, they said. But people make choices, lie by omission, or come home to explain them. When the agenda hit Item 3B, the room quieted like the eye of a storm. I placed the blue binder on the podium and clicked the projector. The screen bloomed. First, the Port Miami still from 03-15-23, 8:03 a.m., circled nails, a profile unmistakable. Next, the DocuSign audit trail with the co-working IP tied to a timestamp. The bank screenshots scrolled, Zelle 1200, 03-13-23, 2:11 a.m., Aksh 8500, Ish 2-23-23, 5:12 p.m., Cash $2,000, E2 23-23, 4:55 p.m. Each number glowed like a neon ledger. Murmurs rose. Good evening, I began, voice steady, the way a teacher starts the class she plans to finish. I'm Evelyn Carter. I lived here at 121 Wilmington Island Road for 36 years. On 02-23 and 03-13, funds from our joint account were used in ways I did not authorize. A car, the Tesla Model S, was purchased with community funds and assigned to a third party as business. I have here the purchase agreement, the DocuSign audit, showing the signature originated from an IP address not in my home, Port Miami Stills, and a DocuSign view from Megan.Lewis on the same envelope. I clicked. The audience inhaled with me. A man in the rear shouted, "Where is Thomas?" The president, Greg, looked irritated as only someone in elected mundanity can. He's at sea, Greg said. He's expected back. I played the sentry clip on the screen. Feb 23, 4:58 p.m., the dealership glass, Thomas leaning in like a man rehearsing a lie. The woman's reflection, Megan, touched the hood. On the table, I set the USB and asked the moderator to allow playback. The room watched the stills in sequence. Faces hardened. Thomas's name rose like a rumor. A woman whispered, "He told us he was handling some HOA vendor things." Harold, the treasurer, murmured, "If there's a charger installed without permit, that's a $1,000 fine per the bylaws." I clicked to the HOA email draft. Retroactive approval requested. 0 fee. Submitted by Thomas Carter. The room's anger knitted into a shape. At the back, someone stood. My niece's voice, hoarse with a practiced tone, calling me dramatic. I expected Megan's defense. Instead, a different neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, who'd once complained Thomas's hedge was offensive, said, "If this is true, that's theft of community trust." The room murmured agreement. The moderator called for decorum. Thomas finally called in, his voice thin and oily through the speakerphone on the table. "This is ridiculous," he said. "My wife is confused. She's unstable." "Mr. Carter," I said, leaning toward the mic, "you authorized a business certification for this vehicle naming Ms. Megan Lewis as primary operator. You made a down payment of $8,500 on 02-23 withdrew cash $2,000 the same day, and forged a spousal acknowledgement on the DocuSign envelope originating from an IP not associated with our home. You called my integrity into question. I brought the documents. I punched the remote. The room saw the DocuSign audit with the co-working IP and the time, 16:59:12, my fake signature in the perfect font. Silence bent the room. Thomas's voice hitched. "You're lying," he said. I slid the notarized bill of sale across the podium so it shone under the light. Sold for $1, 03/2023. Purpose, preservation of community value. Pastor Lorraine stood and read into the room. Witnessed and notarized. Mr. Carter's vehicle was lawfully conveyed in good faith to preserve the value of our shared property, while allegations are resolved. People began to ask the consequences aloud. Legal action, IRS attention, HOA fines, loss of trust. Harold reached for his phone and typed. I watched the calculator on my desk in the binder expand like a ledger of consequence. $85,000 diminished to a story with receipts. Murmurs shifted to motions. Greg proposed a special vote to refer the matter to the city and council. Hands rose. Thomas sputtered and then quieted. The call ended. A neighbor, someone whose fence line Thomas had once sneered at, said, "We can't have people buying things with community-shared money and assigning them to outsiders." The moderator read the motion. Refer to legal counsel for investigation. Freeze HOA privileges pending outcome. The vote was unanimous. As the room emptied, neighbors came up to touch my shoulder, to hand me casseroles, to tell me they'd always suspected something off. Someone pressed a printout of the DocuSign audit into my hand and said quietly, "We'll stand with you." I felt the small, heavy currency of community turning toward me like a weather vane. Outside, the March air tasted like rain. My phone vibrated. Unknown. A message that read only, "You've made powerful enemies. T." I set the binder on the passenger seat of my old Camry, closed the door, and watched through the windshield as one by one the taillights left like punctuation. When I unlocked my bag, the blue Velcro pouch where I had stitched the spare fob was open, and the fob was gone. The first email arrived like a polite execution. Notice of account freeze. Reference, HarGF 3291. It was from the bank's legal department, time-stamped March 28, 9:14 a.m. Marla sat across from me at her kitchen table, her face a map of satisfaction and tiredness, and read it aloud. Pursuant to subpoena and pending investigation into suspected fraud and forged instruments, Savannah First Federal has temporarily restricted withdrawals from Ardsley Renovations LLC and joint account ending 2580 effective today. She tapped the page. They'll cooperate with law enforcement. That's fast. I should have felt triumphant, but justice is an engine that hums. Triumph is the horn. Instead, I felt the slow, certain satisfaction of paperwork settling into place, the same feeling I get filing grades on a Friday afternoon. Still, a ripple of newness ran through the neighborhood. The HOA posted the referral to council on its portal March 27th, and by March 29th, the neighborhood grapevine had transmogrified into a steady drumbeat. Thomas's phone lit with messages that asked for explanations and returned favors he could not cash. That afternoon, a man I'd only ever seen in suits, Mr. Allen, from the Georgia Real Estate Commission, arrived with a badge and the sort of stare that reads ledgers as divination. He showed me a document, Temporary Administrative Suspension of Real Estate License Pending Investigation. The date? March 30th, 2023. His tone was polite but final. We received a complaint alleging fraud and misuse of client funds. We must act to protect the public. I traced the letters with a finger that had written lesson plans for 3 decades. The man's name, Greg Milton, called from the HOA. He'd already taken a vote to restrict Thomas's HOA privileges. Small towns run on small mercies and small punishments meted with the efficiency of a machine. Calls from his clients were the sharpest knives. "Thomas, we need our files," one realtor barked. "We can't be tied to this." Listings were withdrawn, deposits reversed where they could be. An escrow company emailed, "Pending review, hold on disbursements." And I felt the practical arithmetic of consequence. Reputations cost money, and money costs reputations. Megan's role altered the story in a way I hadn't expected. Her attorney called on March 29th and left a message. Megan wishes to cooperate. Later that evening, she came to my porch with a thin envelope, her eyes riffling like pages. Inside, a printed email chain showing DocuSign activity and an admission, handwritten. I viewed and clicked T told me to. Her cooperation crystallized the narrative into a single verdict. She had been a participant, not merely an accessory. Law enforcement served subpoenas on Ardsley Renovations LLC and on the co-working space that hosted the DocuSign IP on March 30th. The co-working manager said in his statement he recognized Thomas's habit of logging in from a remote desk. The local paper, one I had once used for class projects, ran a piece on March 31st with my name mentioned and a headline that flattened me and raised me all at once. Savannah couple at center of HOA and financial inquiry. Neighbors who once waved now avoided the driveway. Others brought casseroles and offered quiet applause. Thomas called once, a voice as flinty as broken glass. "Evelyn, this is ridiculous. You don't understand the legal exposure you create." I let him ramble like a broken projector. That night, I stood at the kitchen window and watched the street. The Tesla was gone. My symbolic sale had become a legal tool, and Thomas's name was being stripped from letterheads and authority. He had lost clients, status, and the comfortable assumption that power could be exercised without receipts. The police had not arrested anyone yet. Investigations do not always end in handcuffs, but the machinery had started grinding in a way that would make it impossible for him to return to the smooth life he'd curated. When I checked my email before bed, one message remained unread. From unknown. Subject: you broke the wrong things. The body held only 3 characters. T. If he could send threats, could he also engineer a reversal that erased what I'd built with pen and proof? The weeks after the subpoena taught me a new rhythm. Court calendars, council meetings, stamps. Marla and I moved through them like 2 careful burglars, except we were breaking into a safe built of lies. On April 3rd, the county clerk accepted our petition for temporary relief, an emergency motion to restore access to joint assets for daily living expenses and to prevent dissipation of marital assets pending discovery. The judge's rubber stamp felt heavier than any applause. On April 6th, the court issued a limited injunction. Thomas could not transfer funds from the joint account or from Ardsley Renovations LLC without court approval. Practical justice arrived first. With the bank compelled by subpoena and the injunction in place, I could access enough of our joint account to pay for essentials. I transferred a modest emergency sum, $4,200, to a new separate account I opened in my name at Savannah Community Credit Union. It felt both ridiculous and intimate. A woman my age, learning again what it means to sign for herself. I wrote the number on a sticky note and taped it inside my binder. Savings, $4,200, April 7th. Then the social consequences found their shape. Thomas's brokerage clients dissolved into polite emails and quiet departures. The Georgia Real Estate Commission continued its review. HOA privileges remained suspended. Ardsley Renovations LLC's bank had frozen its operating account, leaving him unable to pay vendors or staff. Vendors called to ask when invoices would clear. Thomas's pride no longer covered his obligations. At the local market, a friend I'd taught, whose husband used to play golf with Thomas, sidled up and said, "Evelyn, we'll help you with anything you need." Community is a ledger that sometimes balances back in your favor. A small restitution came in the form of paperwork. On April 10th, Marla emailed a proposed settlement draft that the investigators encouraged as an interim remedy. Thomas would relinquish certain discretionary accounts and reimburse a portion of the questionable expenditures to a jointly supervised escrow while criminal inquiries proceeded. We did not sign immediately. Justice, like a recipe, requires time and the right temperature. But a hand extended is better than none. The most intimate victory required no court. I drove to the small frame house on Wilmington Island Road that my mother left me and sat on the porch swing with the blue binder on my knees. I pulled from my purse the single-dollar bill, wrinkled, ceremonious. and slipped it into a simple frame I'd ordered at the craft store for $12.49. I wrote beneath it in my own crooked hand, "Value, freedom." I hung it in the kitchen where the light catches it at noon and makes a small halo. People asked what I'd lost: the Tesla, some illusions, time. They asked what I'd gained: truth recorded in signatures, a community that turned toward evidence, the strange calm of a woman who had learned to read the ledger of her life without apology. I began teaching again, volunteering at the Adult Education Center 2 mornings a week, and I kept receipts, of course, more diligently, and now with a small smirk. Legal processes continued. Investigations rarely move like a train on clear tracks, but the practical results were real: frozen accounts, clients gone, an injunction protecting our household finances, and a board vote on HOA penalties that would see Thomas liable for up to $3,000 in fines if the charger violations were confirmed. At night, I read the messages people sent: casseroles, offers to mow my lawn, a dozen small kindnesses that, when counted, became a fortress. I placed the blue folder on the mantel beside the wedding program from June 8, 1985, now less a relic and more a record. I whispered to the empty chair across from me, "Justice takes time, but it learns patience." Then I breathed and planned the next chapter of my life: quiet, ledgered, mine. But when the detective called that evening and said the forensic analyst had found something on the DocuSign logs that pointed to a new, unexpected IP, one registered to an address I recognized, what I felt was not relief, but another, colder decision forming in my hands. Detective Pruitt called at 4:17 p.m., a time of day when the light in my kitchen turns the framed $1 bill into a small, stubborn sun. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "our forensic analyst found an additional DocuSign access log. Not the co-working space, a different IP, registered to 121 Wilmington Island Road. My address." He read the line: "Oro 2, 23, 23, 16, 56, 48. Envelope accessed via Wi-Fi. Carter guest. Device, iPhone 13. I could see it. The pan of lemon bars, the soft nails, the pause in my hallway. Betrayal did not arrive from far seas. It logged in from my foyer. "Do you want to press charges for forgery and unauthorized access?" Pruitt asked. "At my age," I said, "I choose precisely." I signed the complaint for the forgery and left the rest to the slow machinery that had finally learned my name. The practical aftermath found its shape. The HOA levied a $3,000 fine for the unpermitted charger and referred Thomas's zero-fee retroactive approval stunt to council. The bank kept the 2580 account under restriction, and the Georgia Real Estate Commission left his license suspended pending outcome. Ardsley Renovations LLC coughed like a sick engine and then went quiet. Megan's lawyer negotiated a cooperation agreement. She returned $6,100 of the $18,750 she'd taken and wrote a statement that used the words, "I knew." I read it once, then filed it under Unit 6, Confessions. Pastor Lorraine kept the Tesla garaged at the church annex. Unpaid, untouched, VIN XTF 2022, sleeping under a wool cover like a lesson. When the civil order arrived on April 12th, granting me temporary authority to safeguard disputed property, we drove, her in front, me behind, to the Savannah Women's Shelter. The director, Ms. Coates, accepted the donation as conditional transfer pending court outcome. Paper makes room for interim goodness if you write the margins wide enough. I stood by the loading bay, watching the car disappear into work that would outlive my marriage. I took other small measures. I changed my Wi-Fi name to Receipts Live Here. I installed a new deadbolt on the garage door. I opened a class at the Adult Education Center on Tuesday nights, 6 to 8 p.m., titled Women Paper Power. We sit with binders and highlighters, and I tell them what I learned in the most expensive seminar of my life, that a woman can be called scatterbrained for decades and still thread a needle through a lie. They bring cable bills, lease agreements, insurance papers with suspicious boxes ticked. We date, we annotate, we breathe. Once, I thought legacy meant a marriage without scandal and a set of good china. Now it looks like a blue binder on my mantel, a $1 bill framed above my stove, a classroom where women open manila envelopes and find their names printed too neatly. I kept the wedding program from June 8, 1985, not as a promise, but as a record. Next to it sits a photo from March 26, 2023. Me at the HOA podium, a room of faces no longer entertained. I don't smile in either picture. I don't have to. Thomas's last message arrived April 14th, 11:02 a.m. You made this ugly. I typed back something brief and built of numbers. 02-23-16-59. My signature from your co-working IP. 03-13-02-11. Wanted $200 to ML. 03-15. 08-03. Terminal E. Still. 03-20-12. Your bill of sale. That's not ugly. That's a timeline. He didn't answer. Silence can be a verdict. That evening, I walked the block. Azaleas blazed their impossible pinks. Neighbors waved the way people wave when they believe you've done a hard thing without breaking yourself. In my purse, the church handbag, E.H. Christmas 1992, was lighter. The spare fob now lives in a safe at Savannah Community Credit Union, taped to a letter I wrote myself. You did not imagine it. Proof is a mirror you can trust. Back home, I placed the blue folder in a wooden box with my mother's recipes. Peach cobbler, collard greens, and now justice. I touched the glass over the dollar. The house hummed with the ordinary holiness of a clean ledger. I am 63. I am a retired teacher. I keep receipts. I learned to choose myself without apology. And when people ask how I did it, I tell them the truth that set me free. I wasn't the loudest. I had dates and amounts. If this story gave you strength, help us by sharing, liking, and hitting the notification bell. We'd love to hear in the comments which part of the story you liked most. See you tomorrow.